I sat down with, I guess I didn't sit down with, but I had a chat with, I guess I didn't really do that either. One day I woke up and chose being a nuisance was the way to go and emailed Simon Bennet, director and producer of the later seasons of Power Rangers, with some questions about the seasons. I honestly didn't expect a reply, but he so graciously sent me not only a reply, but also not one, but 2 recordings of answers to my questions. And I didn't do anything with it for a year. Sorry, I've been busy! But now let me share with you all some of the behind-the-scenes workings of Power Rangers that we have been shared.
Hi Kerry, this is Simon Bennet here.
Again, super thankful you could join me in this, metaphorical space on the internet. Now for my questions. Let's start off super simple and easy to answer. You could do this in your sleep. Can you tell me about the basic description of the process between getting the Sentai rights and getting it out as a Power Ranger show from the writing and rewriting perspective, of course? Why did I write it so complicated? I'm so sorry, Simon. Sorry. I hope it's okay to call you Simon.
I will go through the writing process shortly, but something to say at the start is that actually securing the rights to a particular season happened quite a bit later in the process than you might imagine. In fact, very often writing was well underway and planning for production was well underway. And the securing the rights was something that Hasbro did often just before we were due to go into production, because it involved a lot of legal conversations between the two companies that often went on for some time. There's some kind of myth floating around on the internet that I've seen that Hasbro owns the rights to every season up to Ryu Soldier or something like that. That's not actually the case. The rights were negotiated season by season for each season that Hasbro wanted to adapt, and the same thing took place under Saban. But anyway, putting the getting the rights to the Sentai season to one side, I guess the writing process began with the writing team looking very closely at the Sentai episodes as they became available to us. And very often that meant in fact it always meant, in my experience, watching the fan subs online, because until the rights were negotiated we didn't have access to any more legitimate footage. And so we used to watch the fan subs and make notes as we watched each episode down, and we weren't really watching for the story of the Sentai. We were watching for, what are the villains, what are the Zords, what do they look like, how many Rangers are there, what colours are they, what kind of combinations do they tend to operate in, and what are the really good action sequences that we could do something with. Because the idea behind Power Rangers, at least since Becker and Alwyn were involved and Chip Lynn with Dino Charge, was that the adaptation aspect of Sentai was taking footage but using it to tell a completely different American story, a Power Rangers story, to the Sentai. So in my mind, Power Rangers was never really an adaptation of Sentai. It was an original show that used Sentai footage and designs to tell a completely different story, if that makes sense. So once a few episodes had been watched, because I know that with Dino Fury in particular, we were watching the episodes at the same speed as the rest of the world was and trying to write the show at the same time. The first thing that happened would be that we'd have an extensive brainstorming process, and we'd work out what was the world that our Power Rangers series was going to take place in, and what were the characters and what were the stories. And in the case of Dino Fury, we actually had a writers room. We brought in quite a few writers, and for a couple of weeks we just did brainstorming, and the characters evolved out of that, and the idea of Dino Henge and characters, Amelia and Warden Garcia, who was actually a sheriff when we first conceived of him, and the whole way the story started. The main arcs, like the story of Amelia's parents and Tarek and Santora, we worked all those things out in those first 2 weeks. And then we had a series of cards that we'd create, one for each of the 44 episodes that we were writing in the case of Dino Fury. although that was originally going to be 22 and then it became 26 and then it became 44. But anyway, each of those cards we would try and assign a piece of footage to. We'd work out what the overall story for that episode was, what the focus, what Ranger that story was going to focus on. That would give us just a broad strokes plan. And it would only be a few lines for each episode. Okay, this is the episode where Tarek, when Santora comes out of a stasis tube and Tarek discovers that all is not perfect in the way that he thought it would be. Or this is the episode where Amelia thinks that Bigfoot is loose. You know, things like just a general kind of thumbnail like that. At the same time, we were building up kind of a calendar Excel spreadsheet of all the suits that came with that series and all the Zords and all the elements. And we would have to create English names for those, and we'd have to send all those off to Hasbro, who would either say, yes, we like that name, or they would change the name to suit their toy marketing plans. And at the same time, we would begin the conversations with Hasbro about acquiring the various suits and props and things, because that was an extensive to and fro process. Things took like about 3 months very often to be packed up and arrive from Japan, and we had to make sure that we got everything right that we needed. And, you know, working with people whose main language was Japanese and us whose main language was English, so we worked very much through illustrations, you know, pictures rather than language. And also, you know, if certain things were broken or worn out or no longer existed with Toei, then we would have to request that new ones were made, which we would pay for. Or we might want to borrow suits from a different season, as we did with the Madame Noir suit that became the Void Queen costume. And that was really because we didn't like the Heiress suit enough for it to become our main villain for so long. It worked well we felt as a giant kind of organic mecha for the finale, but not as something that Santora would transform into. So we wanted something that was more feminine and more dark for her story. Then in terms of the writing process, the first thing that the writers do is they write a concept document, which is basically a 1 or 2 page description of what the story is for each episode. And then that gets sent off to Hasbro and myself and approved or not approved, and various notes are given, and it gets fine-tuned and polished. And then once that has been approved, that concept, it goes to outline stage, which is still in prose but more like a treatment, and that might be a 4 or 5 page document, and it's breaking the story down into scenes and what the structure of the episode might look like, and goes into a lot more detail than the original concept document. And then that gets given to a dialogue writer or a screenplay writer who will write the actual first draft of the script based on that outline. And each of these steps has extensive notes written about, and they get distributed to various people who feedback on them. The various people basically being me, Hasbro brand people, the Hasbro executives who deal with the entertainment aspect of things, and, you know, anything that dealt with, for instance, Harvey losing an arm, or the relationship between Fern and Izzy had to go to an external kind of consultant who would give feedback on the script's handling of various issues, whether it be disability or gay and lesbian relationships. So, and that also applied with the Special Olympics character Lily. We had kind of Special Olympics and disability feedback on her character. So it's a slow process, and after about 2 or 3 weeks the first draft of the script comes back, and that goes through a second draft stage after a whole lot of notes come in, and then a whole lot of notes come in on the second draft, and it goes to a polished stage, and then the first published script is put out, and that gets supplied to the director and the heads of department and the actors, and they start their preparation for shoot based on that production draft. But even so, the scripts don't stop there, because various elements can cause changes in the scripts, and those might be locations that don't quite match what the script requires, or props or visual effects have feedback, or wardrobe issues affect the script, or, you know, the actors' feedback that some of the dialogue doesn't sound like American dialogue, and so it needs to be tweaked. So there are a series of script revisions that go through place that are gone through once the show is in pre-production, production and also right through the shoot. And those are called coloured pages because different productions have different sequences, but you get like green pages, yellow pages, blue pages, pink pages, buff pages, and all those different colours imply a different set of script amendments. And so you're constantly, in the old days, having to replace your pages with appropriately coloured pages, and these days in your iPad or computer you're having to make sure that you are up to date with the latest script revision. And so yeah, that's how the writing takes place. Then of course the show is edited after it's filmed. All the dialogue that takes place between the Rangers when they're in helmets and the monsters and the non-lip sync dialogue is really only considered to be temp, because another writing process happens once the episodes are picture locked, which means that there's no more editing going to be done on them. Basically, the scripts go to the ADR writer, who writes jokes and improves the dialogue and makes sure things are clear, and just generally adds a lot of new script that is then recorded as ADR dialogue by the actors. So I would say that probably 60 to 70% of the non-lip sync dialogue, i.e. people who are wearing masks in the pictures, is rewritten after the pictures are locked. I hope that explains something about the process of how the scripts are written. You know, it's a unique thing. I don't think there are any other shows that actually start with a different show and use raw material from that to make something completely different. So it's kind of reverse engineering, but also it's a great puzzle and challenge and a lot of fun to do.
Thanks for that long reply, really going into depth there. Sorry for the convoluted question, but it's great to know a bit more about the process. Next question is, what was the hardest part for you as a creative during this process? What's the biggest challenges you faced? God, I asked him a complicated question, and now I ask about challenges he's had? God, what was I doing a year ago?
Well, it's a really complicated process with lots of moving pieces, lots of people, lots of different creative disciplines, different sources, and you've got people coming from Japan who make up the stunt performers in the second unit team. You've got the New Zealand crews and cast, you've got the American cast, and then you've got the executives in the States and the people at Toei, and all need to be coordinated and kept happy. So I guess in my job, being a really good communicator and making sure that what we're making matches the brief that we've been given and that everyone is happy with what we're making is the most challenging part of the job. I really enjoy working with people from different cultures, and in the Japanese people's instance, speaking different languages. I just think it's fun. You learn more about different cultures and get to respect people's different disciplines hugely. So that was great. What's the greatest challenge for me? I think I'm quite an introverted person, so actually having to be extroverted and decisive and clear and dealing with lots of people I don't necessarily know very well, often at the same time, is kind of challenging and stressful. But I have to say that I've been a director and a producer all my working life, and Power Rangers has been one of the most challenging and enjoyable shows I've worked on. It's so much fun. And the material is fun, both what we're making and the Sentai material that we're deriving it from. It's great. And everyone who works on the show loves working on it. That's why they came back year after year. It's because it was a really enjoyable gig.
Moving swiftly on, I've always been super curious, but how are the specific Sentai to be adapted decided? Are the team just given a season, or can you choose?
Since I've been involved with the show, the writing team have always recommended to the owner, whether it's Hasbro or Saban, which season to adapt and why. So we would watch the seasons and come up with a premise for the Power Rangers season based on the Sentai. We'd create a Bible and pitch the show and the adaptation, and in my experience our pitches have always been agreed on and accepted. However, we have to look at things like the suits and the toys and the Zords and think, are these cool? Do we really like them? Because we have to like what we're dealing with. And we have extensive conversations with the toy team at Hasbro and the brand team at Hasbro about the the designs that we'll be adapting. And my comments I've made in the past about other, in my opinion, less adaptable seasons. It's not just me, it's come from wide-ranging conversations with various people in both the Toei brand areas about why the seasons that we chose were the best ones to adapt and go with. I hope that answers your question.
Ah, so Tokuja didn't quite make the cut. Understandable. But let's move right on by. Next station, I mean next question. Sorry, I had to. What do you want the fans to know about the overall process, if there is anything specific?
Well, there's nothing that I don't want fans to know about the process, which is partly why I've tried to be accessible while I was in the showrunner position across those 4 years. I don't think there's any reason for adult fans for there to be any mystique or mystery attached to it. Obviously, there are, gossipy, so-and-so behaved really badly on such and such an occasion type stories that will never make it into the public arena because what goes on tour stays on tour kind of thing. But, in terms of behind the scenes information, I don't see why it should be secret. I know that for the young audience, there was a rule that if ever children visited the set, they weren't allowed to see the Japanese stunt team in ranger suits without the helmets on because that would ruin the illusion. Because, of course, as you know, the cast never actually wear the suits with the helmets on. If the helmet is on, it's always a Japanese stunt person, often speaking in Japanese because the scripts get translated into Japanese for them to perform. And then, of course, the voices are all added in ADR. So I find it fascinating and exciting, and I quite like sharing my enthusiasm with other people.
Next question is kind of presumptuous of me, sorry about this, but how much does Toei actually contribute in planning for Power Rangers? What resources or help are you actually given, or are you kind of on your own?
Toei have been immensely helpful. They're not involved in the writing process at all, or the production process, but they have the store of the costumes and props, as well as the digital assets that we sometimes require in our adaptations. So there's ongoing communication about what we would like for the show we're making, what can they ship to us, what is damaged beyond repair and needs to be remade, and any new designs that we may have designed for monsters or special suits like Solon, for instance. Toei have had manufactured for us. So it's a very constructive, very friendly relationship, but it's really all about the communication over the shipping and the resurrection and the construction of any specific assets that we need for each season.
So Solon was made by Toei. Didn't realize that, but great to hear such a great relationship does exist between both companies. I mean, as of this interview was recorded like a year ago. I don't know anymore. But next one. Was there anything you wanted to keep from Sentai, or did you think everything had to change? How do you decide what to keep, to recontextualize, or even change completely?
There are a lot of factors involved in this, and it depends on the season, I guess. We never think we're going to keep the story from the Sentai. It's always an original premise and story, but utilizing the design elements from Sentai. We look at those things and we try and invent characters that reflect what Sentai have already designed, that will serve the story that we're trying to tell. And what elements we keep, it's basically what elements serve the story that we want to tell are the ones that we keep. If suits or props are a bit silly in our eyes, or in Hasbro's eyes, brand's eyes, might not go down well through US lens, then we tend not to adapt those. For instance, there was a burger morpher, I think, in Ninja Steel that we never actually used. And, the camera blasters and beast morphers we had to use because they appeared in footage that we were using, but they really weren't featured strongly or made as toys. And the rationale for that was that no one at Saban thought that the kids who the show was made for knew what SLR cameras looked like because everyone took pictures on their phones. There's very much a sense of what's going to work for the sensibilities of American kids who are the target audience of the show. And whoever owns the show, whether it's been Saban Brands or Hasbro, their brand teams have had quite strong input into what elements are going to work, or what elements they believe are going to work for their audience, as well as tone of the show and what's going to be suitable for young kids. A lot of the Sentai material is considered to be too violent, given the children's regulations for television. Like, we can't have people destroying monsters execution style. Anything that looks like fire that characters are wrapped in, we have to colour it so it looks like magical fire or magical explosions rather than realistic ones. We can't do penetrating injuries, although obviously for once and always, because the intended audience for that was older than the usual Power Rangers audience, we were able to take a lot more liberties with what we could show and say.
Not even the burger morphers? Oh, so sad, but I get it. You gotta do what's best for the toy sales, which, as a business, makes sense. And about once and always, I know all of us were shocked when they said die. Crazy, just that one word had an impact. But it is, as you said, an older audience for that one specifically. Either way, a few more questions left. On to Cosmic Fury now. What was the motivation of making the suits new for Cosmic Fury?
There was a strong desire from Hasbro and the brand people to not be dependent on Japanese footage, and they saw that as being the future of Power Rangers. That gives more creative choice in terms of the storytelling and the visuals. It also means that we don't have to try and match often poorly locations in New Zealand for parts of scenes to match Japanese footage. It also means that the costumes and props can be designed with manufacture by Hasbro of the toys in mind and a US audience in mind. So those are all, clear factors as to why. And, with Cosmic Fury, ideally it would have been all original, but we just didn't have resources in the time frame we had to do all the Zord and Megazord footage originally using CG. We just didn't have the time or money. But we could make new suits and we could make new weapons and morphers and props, which we did. And there was an extensive period of to and fro between our design team in New Zealand and the Hasbro brand and toy teams in the States about what they were actually after. And a lot of it's to do with manufacturing aspects of the toys so they can be made and sold within a budget that's likely to appeal to the kids that they're aimed for, and the playability factors of them, like the morphers. The playability is always really important, and also those seasons, or Cosmic Fury, Hasbro brand were very keen to put the MMPR Lightning Flash on everything Power Rangers related. They just saw it as being important to ensure some sort of consistency. I think one of the issues perceived as being a downside for Power Rangers is the fact that every 2 years there's been a complete change of characters, of costumes, of suits, of weapons, and it means that there is limited opportunity to build an audience, because every 2 years you're breaking everything down and starting again, which is one of the reasons why it was perceived, or it was explained to me, that the show appealed particularly to young kids, because they'd be with the show for a couple of years and they'd grow out of it, and there'd be a new generation of kids who would watch it for 2 years and then grow out of it. But the level of difference between the seasons was not conducive to a long span of viewership or fandom, obviously apart from the adult fans who have watched it for many years. But again, from a sales and marketing and a financial point of view, the adult fans were considered to be a small but vocal minority of the target audience, and the main audience was always the kids.
But Kyuranger would have been so perfect for it, right? Wait, why am I acting like he's right here in a call with me and will answer my live questions? He won't answer. He's an image I got off the internet talking through a pre-recorded phone. No, what am I doing? Anyway, the next question was the following. Fans have noticed that villain suits were used in different shows as to which show they came from. What was the reasoning? Was it just due to what you had on hand?
No, it was a combination of things. Like in some cases, for instance with Dino Fury, we really wanted a a cool suit for the Void Queen, and we thought that the Tokuja villain costumes were fantastic, and we knew that that show was never likely to be adapted, so we could kind of contract with Toei to hire those costumes and utilize them. In Cosmic Fury, there were many suits from a lot of different seasons, basically cannon fodder a lot of the time in the battle scenes. And that was because when we were in development, Toei told us that they were clearing out their warehouses and they had a lot of suits that were going to get thrown out, and would we like to use some of them? And we said, yes, please. So we got a whole lot of suits from different seasons and we found use for them. So that was how that worked out. So it's a deliberate thing because we don't think the season we're adapting gives us exactly what we're looking for to suit the story that we're telling, or we were simply lucky enough to be given some surplus suits that we could integrate into the show.
Honestly, fair. Sad about Tokuja, but about leaving things behind, was there anything you wanted to actually adapt, but were forced to leave behind due to production and such?
No, not in terms of adaptation. There were original designs that we made that didn't get left behind. I mean, there were various monsters that were Janet was one, Retrono was another, that were designed for one of the original iterations of Once and Always. But because that show changed so much in the writing, as Hasbro changed its mind about who the target audience was, those wonderful designs sadly fell by the wayside.
And was there any other Sentai specifically you wanted to adapt?
No, not really. I really like the designs for King Oja. However, that would be very problematic for us to adapt because of the CG worlds and the virtual cinema stages that they use to film them. For us to recreate that would be challenging. However, I could see us utilising the cockpits and the ranger suits, which I really liked a lot, in a possible subsequent season.
And here is my final question. What lessons have you learned for other productions going forward, and would you keep doing Power Rangers if you were invited back?
I learnt a lot working on Power Rangers, predominantly about craft things like visual effects and practical effects, as well as working with full-time second unit and working with international partnerships. So my skill set grew considerably in those areas. Would I keep doing Power Rangers? Yeah, I would. If I was given the chance, it was a whole lot of fun. And, as I said before, one of the best jobs I've ever done. So, if the opportunity to keep going with the show arose, I would jump at it because, I loved making the show. I've said elsewhere that, I'm not a fan of the show, and by that I meant it's not something I would normally choose to watch, but that's the case of most of the TV shows I've worked on in my career. But that doesn't mean I haven't had an absolute blast working on the show and loved every minute of it, which is true because it's fun. So that's it really. I hope this has been helpful for you.
And that was the interview. Chat voice memo thing? But it's a relief to finally get it out. Thank you to Simon Bennet for taking the time to do this for me, and I hope that I have brought you, the audience, something new to learn about the production of the Power Rangers show we all know and love. The current landscape of Power Rangers has changed so much in the last year. Hasbro selling off the props and suits, the confusing silence, and now Power Rangers is confirmed to be next filming in England? What a world we live in! It would be amazing to see some behind the scenes of the British produced Power Rangers, or even go behind scenes or do some voice acting, considering how I live in the UK. And we never get nice things in the UK, Power Rangers specifically. But thanks again, Simon. Appreciate you having this chat with me. Probably doesn't even remember we had this email exchange now, but if you're seeing this now, Simon, hey! If you like this sort of video, please do give it a like, a follow, or even a comment down below and tell me who in the Power Ranger world should I try to email next. Don't know if I'll hit gold twice, but I'm always happy to try. Anyway, see you in the next video. Bye! This is where Simon actually regrets talking to me at all. Oh well, there's always next time. And this interview has already happened, so he can't take it away from me.